Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for D&D today, I have a new mug, if you haven't noticed or not. This one is a Touch Me, I'm Vaccinated mug from Cancun, Mexico. Have I been to Cancun? No, I haven't. But one of my players in my D&D game that I just saw in person found this at Goodwill and got it for me. And I think it's just silly. Please get consent before touching random people, even if, you are vaccinated. Just a general sort of note for everybody out there. Not the point. Inside of it, I have some gunpowder green from Bigelow, which I really thought that I had brought in here. I thought I made a point to go, man, I'm going to bring this one in this time because I'm bad about remembering. So I guess I didn't, but that's okay. No D&T yet. I kind of forgot that it was going to be a holiday in the U.S. here, and that the Postal Service is still kind of playing catch-up in a lot of different ways. So, whenever it comes in, I'll make sure that I have it. I'll make sure I talk about it because I'm excited about it. But until then, not really like holding my breath waiting to get it. I have a cabinet full of plenty of other tea until it does get here. So, that's okay. Anyway, getting into what we're talking about today, we are going to be talking about, I don't know the best way to really phrase this one. We're going to be talking about apex predators. And really what I mean by that is we're going to be talking about sort of like planting a villain almost in an ecosystem type of deal. So I got this idea because I saw a D&D Beyond article talking about how to play an Astral Titan specifically, or an Astral Dreadnought specifically, as an apex predator, like how to use them, how to utilize all their things, how to make them this terrifying thing. And I saw that title actually, and I went, well, I understand why they're doing it for just the one, because they want to have content forever and just be able to put up these random blog posts. But I want to talk about how to actually like implement some kind of major threat slash villain slash predator into an ecosystem within your D&D game. So that's what we're going to do today. For me, I really think that it comes down to three different things, and so we're going to talk about those three things, what they might mean, and sort of move on from there. It's hopefully going to be an actually, interesting conversation here, but who knows, because it also just might not. It just might not. I think that it is helpful to write these things down and think about them. You might not. If you do, that's great. I hope this is very helpful for you. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about it, shall we? To kick things off, in case we are not all totally clear on what an apex predator is in this specific case, an apex predator is the thing at the top of a food chain in any given ecosystem. It is the thing that nothing else hunts to eat. So in nature, outside, generally speaking, you will have an apex predator that is like a lion or a wolf or something like that, which is a perfectly viable way to, not a perfectly viable way, it is a perfectly viable option in your D&D game. If you have a strictly natural ecosystem that you're going with, and by natural I mean our world natural, then you can absolutely just go ahead and pull one of those from outside and put it in your D&D game, and it will be something that people can understand and relate to pretty much immediately. However, unfortunately or fortunately, it kind of depends on the way you look at it, D&D is chock full of stuff that really makes the stuff we've got in real life seem kind of weak and sad. It's got a lot of monsters and magic and cool, crazy stuff like that. So, in all likelihood, you're not going to have one of your general natural beasts as an apex predator. You might have it living in sort of concurrence with another thing, but it is likely that whatever the magical fantasy creature is, it's going to be outpacing your natural, normal animal. So let's go ahead and talk about these three things that I really sort of ask myself when I'm trying to build up this ecosystem, and how really you can sort of apply those things to the game and then turn it into actually dropping a villain into the game. And you're going to notice as I go through these three things that they are applicable to really just pretty much any creature that you want to be some kind of a threat to your characters, because at the end of the day, that is kind of ultimately what an apex predator is in D&D or in any ecosystem, it is the top threat in that ecosystem. So let's go ahead and let's dive in. Number one here, the thing that I think about is it quote unquote upfront or quiet? Meaning, is it something that makes a show of taking out whatever victim it has, or is it something that does it very quietly, very sort of off to the side, and less of a public display? Options for this sort of thing might be something like a dragon making a show of some kind of power in a public execution of a certain individual as they sort of like flex those muscles. Or quiet could be that it is some kind of undead ghostly creature that is haunting this place and is actively trying to create problems for the town, and so they're taking people in the nighttime. Mind flayers also oftentimes will be good sort of quieter monsters to use because they with their hive mind and their elder brain can kind of like influence the mind's dreams and I guess thought patterns of other creatures within their sort of sphere of influence, and so you can get people to do some things that they wouldn't normally do and get them sort of alone in such a way so that you can take them out with those mind flayers. That is the upfront or quiet. Again, more like a real normal world example of this would be maybe a wolf pack versus like a panther, whereas the panther will like stalk and be very quiet, and then the wolf pack will be generally very loud, show intimidation via size and force and that kind of thing. Obviously, wolves still stalk their prey and stuff like that, but you get what I'm trying to go for there. The next one on the list is it received with fear or with terror? This one, in my mind at least, plays more directly into the overall intelligence of this creature, in that if it is something that people are afraid of, but not terrified of, the fear suggests that it is intelligent enough to be able to sort of like parse out what it is going to be pulling specifically from a lineup. So it is the concept of like the weakest here is going to be the one that I go for. Whereas terror, it is a crapshoot on if it walks up to you, whether or not it's going to rip your throat out or not. So let's see. Examples for this, fear, well, it is hard to sort of distinguish between these two because most of the things, well, in this scenario, you are afraid of everything. It's just whether or not you are afraid of it being a just like brutal murder at random or something that it goes through and picks out. And so I guess I would go back to the dragon once again with sort of the fear, even though dragons are terrifying. In that the fear associated with the dragon might be that they pick you specifically to go ahead and make an example of, whereas the terror could be something a little bit more mindless. I mean, technically they say that white dragons are more animalistic and more sort of rah everywhere. Everybody say hi to Johnny real quick. He was on my desk, so I picked him up. And so the terror could be that sort of concept associated with it. That one really feeds into this third point that I have here, which is just, is it random or is it calculated? In that the randomness factor is what is associated with the terror of it, and the calculated is what is associated with the fear. But this one is more specifically to gauge the actual full scope of the intelligence of this creature, in that can it like size you up? Can it determine the best individual to go after? Can it determine the ramifications of going after that individual? Because if you are always going after the weakest in a crew, you might not necessarily be the strongest individual or the strongest monster or predator or whatever, but if you are consistently going after weak ones, you might not be the strongest. However, if you can pick out a leader type and go after that one, it will show that you are strong, and you might understand that the single show of strength there is much better for you overall, because it will instill that fear directly into sort of the core of the community that you are dealing with. And so those are sort of my 3 points there. in that it's the three things that I think about. For me, they are kind of linked in that there is one option on either side of each of those questions that then sort of connects down to the other ones, just sort of naturally. For me, it is an up front, so a in front of you, kind of messy, terror-based and random predator that will be sort of the less calculating, less intelligent, less sort of like tyrannical ruler kind of thing, whereas the quiet, fear-based, and calculated one is one that is going to be something that really sort of like zeroes in on what it needs to. It will unsettle an entire sort of settlement or civilization associated with it, or a population in a certain area, because it is coming in and making very calculated, very directed strikes at different pieces of the actual structure of the community that it's associated with. The quiet and upfront can sort of flip back and forth for me, in that it could be somebody who walks in, calls out somebody, and makes a public execution as sort of a show of force, as opposed to somebody who is very, very sneaky, tries to kill them outright. But a lot of times for me specifically, when I'm building these, it will be a quiet, fear-based, calculated, sort of pinpointed strike, as opposed to a upfront, quiet, calculated, or a quiet, terror-based, randomized sort of encounter. It might appear to be random, but it is always going to have some kind of motivation behind it. Now, a couple of other random little things to think about when you're making an Apex Predator. Generally speaking, if something is able to be at the top of the food chain, it is also probably going to be intelligent enough to keep itself there, or it will have enough raw power to keep itself there, or both of those things. That is important to remember, because a lot of times people will plant this thing at the top of some food chain. It will become this threat that has rolled into town, and then when they go and try and interact with it, it doesn't have the intelligence to keep it there. It doesn't have the raw strength to keep it there. And this monster that has been sort of rendering this town, city, settlement, whatever it is, in absolute terror of it, it doesn't hold up. And so you want to make sure that you have, if you are going for something that is more intelligent, you want to have things like traps, you want to have contingency plans, you want to have all kinds of different things for it to be an effective monster. If it is something of brute strength, you also probably want to have some traps, but some more simple ones that will be less, finessed and more just absolute raw power, sheer force of strength associated with it. And those ones that are going to be just power are going to need to hit very, very hard. The ones that are more intelligent don't necessarily need to hit crazy hard. They just need to be much harder to hit, probably. And a lot of times we'll have some kind of magic, because again, we're dealing with magic and mystery and fantasy and all of that kind of thing. So, the Apex Predator spot on a list, generally speaking, for an ecosystem, should be something that is occupied. However, it can be something that rotates, and I think that it is important to be able to morph what you have going on enough to be able to accommodate new monsters that have come into the area. It is important too, however, to remember that you really should have some way to have everything in the chain below it react. You don't need to have it be where if something comes in and it kills off the wolf population, suddenly everything else explodes in population, because it's going to take years for that to actually occur. Maybe a year, but a number of years. It's not going to take 2 weeks. But you should have sort of immediate ramifications of this change, and you should be thinking kind of about what the long-term shift is going to be if that thing is left unchecked. So make sure that you go ahead and determine exactly how this thing operates, exactly what it is that people are afraid of with it, in that you should determine the actual threat that it poses, and you should make sure that you have essentially the stat block to back it up, or the tactics to back it up. You should have something meaty to back it up, whether that meat is in text or in actual power of the thing. Make sure that you have something to back it up, because you don't want to frame this whole thing up to be really, really cool and really, really awesome and then have it fall flat. Because if it falls flat, it's going to feel not great as a DM. It's not going to feel great as a player. And so try and make sure you have everything sort of lined up. Again, this can be used sort of as a general template for like big bads ultimately as well. But we're talking specifically about dropping them into different ecosystems. So that is everything I have for you on that. Moving on to the shows we have today and tomorrow. We have, in no particular order, The Paper Dungeon, Chromatic Dice, Beyond the Realms, Unprepared Casters, Greetings Adventurers, Bards of New York, Hapless Heroes, Iron Adventurers, Cast Party, Three Black Halflings, Hello from the Magic Tavern, King Leo D&D, Anti-Heroes Anonymous, The Tabletop Tavern, Top of the Round, and a new one that I just found out about, League of Lady Adventurers. Please go check them out. League of Lady Adventurers is a very, very small show, as are most of the ones that I listed out here. So make sure you go and check out the little guys, as well as a couple of the bigger ones that I listed out here, because everybody deserves some support. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we have Diary of a Dragon Pit, Star Wars First Resistance, Dungeons and Daddies, Bombarded, Heck of a D&D, Glass Cannon, and the Queer Questers. Again, check out as many of these shows as you can. They all deserve all of the support in the world. They do some really phenomenal work, and it is really, really tough to just put yourself out there like that. So I really highly recommend going and taking a look at any of these guys. They are doing some great work. And again, let them know that I sent you, because someday someone is going to say something to me about it, and it's going to be hysterical to me. It won't be that funny to anybody else, but I think that that is very, very funny, and I think that I would really enjoy that. But that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. Thank you so very much for making me a part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the description of this episode. I think that's everything. I think that's it. So, with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.